When everything else fails, this malnutrition ward, the only one in what is Somaliland's only referral hospital, is the last hope for children like Abdurrahman. He has kwashiorkor, a classic symptom of severe malnutrition. He's 18 months old and yet he weighs 5 kilos. We crossed half a dozen large rivers which should be full of rainwater but are completely dry, as camels, the toughest survivors in desert conditions, wander in search of pasture and water. International agencies are just beginning to step up their response to what's unfolding in Somaliland. They face the challenge of suddenly having to transform their presence here from being focused on long-term development to immediate, desperately needed relief. If they don't, and the rains fail, it would lead to one thing and one thing only.
The Somali community in Southampton and local groups are working with a Disasters Emergency Committee made up of UK charities to get help to where it's most needed. Well, children are particularly at risk. The UN says it's now the world's largest crisis since 1945.
These are the sons, brothers, cousins of those facing starvation. Members of Southampton's Somali community know back home a famine is starting. 3 years without rain means millions have nothing to eat.
A lot of people I know are passed away because of this. A lot of people I know that have been well affected, and it will be a matter of time before my family also is in that sort of situation.
Somaliland is a place ravaged by thirst and hunger. It's not rained for 3 years. Livestock is dying, and if things go on like this, millions of people could starve. Relatives here are constantly seeking information about their loved ones and doing what they can.
My mother has siblings as well as extended family who are directly facing the consequences of the drought, and we feel as Somali diaspora that it's our duty and kind of obligation to assist our people who are in dire need. I can't sit back and watch my people suffer and me do nothing about it.
Is there any evidence that more medical supplies are getting through?
Not in the remote areas, and I think that's the real sort of key. It's always when you are a journalist and you're an aid worker and you do go to those clinics, the key question is how many are not getting through.
Over the past week on ITV News, we've covered the potentially devastating crisis unfolding in East Africa. Drought and conflict have left 16 million people on the brink of starvation in South Sudan and Somalia.
Raising money in London that's destined to save lives in Somalia.
Thank you so much.
This community in Brent is being reminded of its roots and urged to do what it can to help.
Thank you so much. And we're trying our best to help our people back home who's suffering hunger and no water. And you see, they're going through a hard time, and I stand up to help with them, and I always do that.
What was it like there? What did you see?
Well, an enormous amount of need. The figures are sort of barely believable. I mean, if you count not just Somalia, but the whole 4 countries that are involved.
Cardiff has long been home to a vibrant Somali community, and they're doing all they can to try to help.
They're trying to shy away from the camera. They hardly can move, especially the women. And it makes you wonder what's happening, what's left, you know, what's going to happen after this.
What was it like on a personal level for you, this trip?
Shock, horror, you know, great upset, you know, anger, and then of course, you know, resolution to try and do something about it.
Charities in our part of the world have stepped up their efforts to help as a relief fund has been set up by the Disasters Emergency Committee.
You're from Somalia. What are your concerns?
Yes, and honestly, it's quite heartbreaking, to be honest. Somalia is going through its 3rd drought in the past 25 years, and according to the World Health Organization, half the population does need humanitarian aid.
Now, people in the Midlands with family in East Africa have spoken of their desperation as a devastating drought causes famine, which could kill millions.
It may be thousands of miles away, but for the Somali community here in the Midlands, It feels very close to home.
Sometimes really you sit down a corner and you will gonna cry really what's happening there. To see is really hard and very, very, very difficult.
Are we able to see exactly how we can help in this country?
Yes, just to give you an example, £100 can sustain an entire clinic, can you believe, a therapeutic feeding clinic for these malnourished children for a week.
Next tonight, the fundraising here to help those suffering in the deepening humanitarian crisis in Central Africa and parts of the Middle East.
We're trying our best to set up the charity to raise awareness and get like funding, medicine, anything, whereas people, even clothes.
Over the last few weeks, they've already sent clothes, money and even an ambulance and doctor to treat more than 2,000 people. But they know it's barely scratching the surface.
People here in the North East are being urged to contribute to a relief fund set up by the Disasters Emergency Committee.
The North East may be 4,000 miles from those who are suffering, yet in this place of quiet reflection, it is the only thing on people's minds. The Sacred Heart in Gosforth fundraises with other churches.
I don't think anyone in the world accepts that people should be dying of starvation in 2017. I think the response of the churches here in North Gosforth show that it's a real human response to those who are dying.
Any project we ever do here, businesses, local people, children, are so quick to give and help, which I feel catches the spirit of the North East.
Charity shops around the region are also doing what they can to raise money. Items donated by the public are being sold to gather funds to try to ease the plight of those caught up in the crisis.
So many people are having to move, not only themselves but their animals, to other areas to try and find food and water and accommodation, which is a very great upheaval for the families. And unfortunately, a lot of them are so ill that a lot of them probably will not make the journeys.
We have to respond very quickly, it's the first thing, because we need support in there urgently. And secondly, we have to respond generously, because in the end, this is the most basic human suffering.
Tell us more about the situation on the ground.
Well, it's pretty dire, and it's heartbreaking to behold. You're talking about 4 countries in which 20 million people are threatened with famine. In fact, famine has already been declared in one of them in South Sudan.
Good evening. The West Country is responding to what's being described as one of the worst humanitarian crises in decades.
In the heart of Bristol is a community with Somalia in its heart and the drought affecting its people at the forefront of their minds. The people we meet here tell me they're worried about their homeland.
The drought is natural disaster and its children and vulnerable people are suffering there, and we try to help as much as we could.
What is causing this famine? It's not just the lack of rain, is it?
No, and the common theme is conflict and instability, and it runs right the way through the 4 main countries that are threatened with famine.
At its headquarters in Truro, shelter box staff are preparing the aid they hope to send.
A high proportion of the population live a nomadic lifestyle, so we'll be looking to really target a very lightweight-based shelter solution. So you're looking at tarpaulins.
Charities here in the East are doing all they can to send aid to help people facing starvation.
Somalis living here say they feel helpless.
It's extremely desperate. I'll give you one example. There was one lady that was talking about last night that she'd had her little niece had lost her parents, and she's only 9 years old, and she's had to drag her little brother onto her back, walk up to 30 to 40 miles back up north.
People are actually starting to realise that this is an urgent issue and that we need to try and come together and unite in order to try and alleviate people dying from hunger.
There has been famine in the region before. Around 250,000 people died in Somalia in 2011. How is it happening again so soon afterwards?
But it's only, of course, when cameras do go to these places and stories are heard and it's brought right into people's homes that people are galvanised to, action.
Wesley Smith reports on the Channel Islands aid efforts.
Spearheading the emergency relief campaign, a world-famous Somalian now making a desperate appeal on behalf of his countrymen, women and children, and millions more across the Horn of Africa.
As a father of 4 kids myself, and seeing kids in that pain, it hurts.
Guernsey is giving from its emergency relief budget. It's obviously a small amount in the grand scheme of things. It's a quarter of our year's emergency relief budget, so that signals the seriousness that we see.
In the last 24 hours, people in Northern Ireland have raised more than £250,000 to help alleviate this crisis. Our reporter Judith Hill has been speaking to Somalian people here who say they simply can't bear to watch as their family members suffer so much.
It's very sad. Very sad. I can't watch. It is very sad.
For these young Somalian women, this is personal. Their family members are the ones suffering.
Sometimes they phone us like crying and seeing they're like, they don't even know if they're going to be able to survive because people are dying, there's not enough resources for them to survive on.
You were born in Somalia. The humanitarian disaster there must really shock you.
It is shocking, but I suppose the thing that really shocks me is the fact that we're here again. It was only in 2011, again, when people warned of a famine in the region and in Somalia, when help didn't come or it came too late. 260,000 people, 260,000 people died, a large number of them children and the elderly. We're at that point again.
And you can see more on this with Raggy in a Tonight special entitled Famine, Millions on the Brink. That's at 7:30 this evening here on ITV.